The rain-slicked sidewalk of Monroe's fading downtown gleamed under the street lamps like a promise half-kept. And that's when Juliet slipped her hand into mine. Not a casual brush, but a deliberate weave of fingers that locked like roots seeking soil. "Don't let go," she whispered, her voice barely cutting through the patter of drops on awnings, her eyes fixed on some invisible horizon beyond the thrift store windows, as if the world might unravel if I did. In that instant, the air thickened with the scent of wet asphalt and her lavender soap, and I knew we'd crossed a line drawn not in ink, but in the quiet cruelties of who we were supposed to be, me, the girl who'd always loved in shadows, and her, the one everyone swore was stitched from sunlight and straight lines. Eleanor Hayes had learned early that love in Monroe was like the Mississippi River, wide and unforgiving, carving paths that swallowed secrets whole. Born and raised in the shadow of the old cotton warehouses, she'd spent her 28 years navigating the town's invisible currents, where debutante balls still whispered of old money and older sins, and the Baptist steeple loomed as both sanctuary and sentinel. Her family ran the Hayes Feed and Seed on the outskirts, a clabbered relic of her grandfather's grit, now barely scraping by against the chain stores creeping in from Shreveport. Eleanor managed the books, her days filled with the rustle of invoices and the low hum of diesel trucks, her nights with dog-eared novels borrowed from the library that spoke of women who dared to rewrite their endings. Juliet Landry was the sun to her moon, radiant, untethered, the kind of woman who turned heads at the county fair without trying. At 30, she was Monroe's golden child, daughter of the Landry logging empire that owned half the pine forest stretching toward the Arkansas line. Engaged once, briefly, to a banker from Baton Rouge who smelled of cologne and ambition, she'd called it off with a laugh that echoed like wind chimes, claiming she wasn't ready for rings that felt like shackles. Now she taught 3rd grade at the elementary school, her classroom a riot of finger paints and fairy tales, her laughter the thread that stitched the town's frayed edges together. Juliet and Eleanor had been friends since high school, bonded over shared bleacher seats at football games and late-night drives down Route 165, windows down, radio crooning Patsy Cline. Friendship pure and unexamined, until that afternoon in the thrift store, when the world tilted. It started innocently enough, as these things often do in places like Monroe, where boredom breeds impulse. The sky had cracked open mid-morning, a sudden downpour that chased them into Eloise's emporium, a warren of mismatched shelves crammed with cast-offs from finer lives. Juliet had texted Eleanor at dawn. "Rainy day cure thrift hunt? Pick you up at noon." Eleanor, nursing coffee in her cramped apartment above the feed store, walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments, had hesitated only a beat before typing back yes. She told herself it was routine, the kind of outing that filled the hollows of a Saturday without demanding more. Inside the shop, the air hung heavy with mothballs and forgotten perfumes, fluorescent lights buzzing like distant cicadas. Juliet darted from rack to rack, her auburn curls escaping a loose ponytail, holding up a velvet blazer the color of bruised plums. "This screams you mysterious professor in some smoky New Orleans jazz club." Eleanor chuckled, fingers trailing the frayed hem. But her gaze lingered on Juliet's profile, the way her nose wrinkled in delight, a gesture so unguarded it stirred something deep and unnamed in Eleanor's chest. They moved like that for an hour, trading quips over faded scarves and porcelain teacups chipped like old grudges. Juliet piled her arms with finds, a silk slip dress, a pair of silver hoop earrings too bold for Monroe's subdued Sundays, while Eleanor played the skeptic, folding her arms against the extravagance. "You're going to bankrupt that teacher's salary on relics," she teased, but there was warmth in it, the easy rhythm of years spent orbiting each other. Then the rain intensified, drumming the tin roof like impatient fingers, and the power flickered, plunging the shop into a twilight haze. Mrs. Eloise, the proprietress with her cat-eye glasses and perpetual squint, muttered about faulty wiring and shuffled to the back for candles. In the dimness, Juliet's voice dropped, laced with a vulnerability Eleanor rarely heard. "You ever feel like you're just pretending? Like Monroe's this beautiful cage, and everyone's too polite to mention the bars?" Eleanor leaned against a display of tarnished silverware, the words landing like stones in still water. She'd felt it her whole life, the pretense of Sunday suppers where her mother's eyes darted away from any mention of city folk and their loose ways, the unspoken rule that Hayes women married men from the Chamber of Commerce, bore sons to carry on the name. Eleanor's own heart had betrayed her early, first with a summer camp counselor in the Smokies whose goodbye kiss tasted of pine and regret, then with stolen glances at the bartender in Jackson who moved like she owned the night. But Juliet? Juliet was the straight one, the one who dated quarterbacks and quoted Bible verses at youth group, the one whose world Eleanor admired from afar, safe in the knowledge it would never claim her. "I do," Eleanor admitted, her voice a thread in the gloom. "Every damn day." Juliet turned, her silhouette softened by shadow, and that's when she reached out. Not for the blazer or the earrings but for Eleanor's hand, cool fingers curling around warm ones, a grip that started tentative but tightened as if testing the weight of truth. Eleanor's breath caught, the thrift store fading to a blur of velvet and dust, the world narrowing to the pulse thrumming between their palms. Juliet's eyes met hers, stormy green holding steady, and in that hold Eleanor saw the fracture lines. The fiancé who'd proposed with a diamond as cold as his expectations, the parents who paraded her at garden parties like a prize mare, the town's whispers about her flighty ways, masking a deeper hunger for something real. "Don't let go," Juliet said again, softer now, the words a plea wrapped in fog. And Eleanor didn't. Not then, not as Mrs. Eloise returned with a lantern that cast their joined hands in flickering gold, not as they paid for their treasures and stepped back into the rain, umbrellas forgotten, dashing to Juliet's truck parked crookedly at the curb. The drive home blurred through windshield wipers slapping rhythm, radio static swallowing half-formed sentences. Juliet's hand stayed in Eleanor's lap, a quiet anchor amid the storm. They pulled up to Eleanor's apartment, the feed store's neon sign buzzing faintly below, and for a moment neither moved. The cab smelled of wet denim and unspoken questions, the engine ticking as it cooled. "I should go," Eleanor murmured, but her fingers betrayed her, squeezing back. Juliet leaned across the console, her free hand brushing a damp strand from Eleanor's forehead, a touch so feather-light it burned. "What if we didn't pretend anymore? Just for tonight?" The kiss came unbidden, tentative as the rain easing to drizzle, Juliet's lips soft and searching against Eleanor's. It tasted of salt and sweetness, of thrift store dust and the wild edge of what-ifs. Eleanor pulled back first, heart hammering like a freight train through the pines, her mind a whirlwind of this can't be in God, I want it. Juliet's eyes searched hers wide with the same dawning terror and thrill. "Inside," Juliet whispered, and they tumbled out into the night, hands still linked, the stairs creaking under their urgency. Eleanor's apartment was a sanctuary of mismatched furniture and books stacked like battlements. Willa Cather beside Faulkner, dog-eared pages marking passages on forbidden desires. They shed raincoats and doubts in the hallway, Juliet's laughter bubbling nervous as she kicked off boots, Eleanor fumbling with the lock. Inside, the space felt too small for the gravity of it, lamplight pooling on the worn rug like spilled honey. They talked first because that's what friends do. Curled on the sagging couch, mugs of chamomile steaming between them, the storm outside a distant rumble. Juliet spoke of her engagement's slow suffocation, the way her mother's pearl necklace felt like a noose at the rehearsal dinner, the groom's hands on her waist a map to a life she couldn't chart. He was fine, else safe. But safe isn't alive. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Eleanor reached out, tracing the vein along Juliet's wrist, a lifeline in the dim. "And you?" Juliet asked, turning the mirror. "Who's the ghost in your stories? The one you never name?" Eleanor hesitated, the weight of 20 years pressing down. She'd buried her first love under layers of silence. A girl from New Orleans, met at a folk festival in the quarter, whose goodbye note read, "Monroe will eat you alive if you let it." Since then, flings in anonymity. A weekend in Memphis with a musician whose tattoos told tales Eleanor couldn't read. A one-night stand in Little Rock that left her hollow. "No ghosts," she lied softly. "Just echoes." Juliet shifted closer, the couch dipping, their knees brushing. "I don't believe that." Her hand found Eleanor's again, thumb circling the knuckle in a rhythm that echoed heartbeats. The air hummed with possibility, the kind that simmers before it boils. When their lips met the second time, it was deliberate, Juliet's mouth warm and insistent, tasting of tea and resolve. Eleanor's hands framed her face, thumbs tracing jawlines sharp as secrets, and the world dissolved into the press of bodies yielding, clothes pooling like fallen leaves. Juliet's skin was fever-hot under Eleanor's palms, her breaths coming in gasps that mingled with sighs, the room filling with the soft symphony of discovery, zippers whispering, fabric rustling, the creak of springs under shifting weight. It wasn't frenzy but a slow unraveling, Juliet's fingers mapping Eleanor's collarbone like braille, learning the language of curves and hollows she'd never spoken aloud. Eleanor guided her, murmurs lost in hair, showing where touches lingered, where they ignited. In the afterglow, tangled in sheets that smelled of lavender and rain, Juliet rested her head on Eleanor's chest, listening to the steady thrum beneath. "This changes everything," Juliet said into the darkness, her voice a mix of awe and ache. Eleanor stared at the ceiling fan's lazy spin, shadows dancing like specters. "Or nothing. We're still us." But as sleep claimed them, hands entwined even in dreams, Eleanor knew the lie of it. Monroe didn't forgive deviations. It catalogued them, whispered them over sweet tea and Sunday roasts, until they festered into scandals that toppled families like lightning-struck oaks. Dawn crept through the blinds like a thief, painting stripes across Juliet's sleeping form, and Eleanor lay awake, tracing the rise and fall of her breath with eyes that burned from unshed tears. The night had been a revelation, bodies speaking truths words couldn't touch, but morning brought the reckoning. The cold clarity of coffee brewing and mirrors reflecting faces flushed with what couldn't be undone. Juliet stirred, stretching like a cat in sunlight, her smile tentative as she reached across the rumpled sheets. "Morning, stranger," she murmured, pulling Eleanor close, lips brushing temple in a kiss that lingered like dew. They moved through the ritual of breakfast in stolen glances and accidental touches. Juliet perched on the counter in Eleanor's oversized flannel, legs swinging as Eleanor scrambled eggs with hands that trembled faintly. Talk skirted the edges. Weather turning fair, the thrift store's velvet blazer now draped over a chair like a flag of truce. But beneath it ran the undercurrent, electric and unspoken. Juliet's foot nudging Eleanor's calf under the table. A Morse code of more. "I have to teach today," Juliet said finally, regret threading her voice as she rinsed plates. "But tonight? Dinner at my place. No pretenses." Eleanor nodded, throat tight, the promise hanging heavy as the humid air seeping through cracked windows. She watched Juliet dress, auburn curls tamed into a braid, the slip dress from yesterday peeking from her bag like contraband. At the door their goodbyes stretched. Foreheads pressed, breaths mingling, until Juliet pulled away with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "See you at 7. Don't be late, Hayes." The day dragged like molasses in January. At the feed store, Eleanor tallied sacks of cornmeal and fertilizer, her mind a loop of Juliet's sighs, the curve of her neck under moonlight. Customers trickled in, farmers with calloused hands bartering for seed, Mrs. Hargrove from the diner sniffing out gossip over a bag of birdseed. "Heard Juliet's truck at your place late last night," the old woman said, eyes sharp as shears. "Girls got no sense in this weather." Eleanor's smile was a shield. "Practice from years of deflection. Just outrunning the storm, ma'am. You know how she drives." But the seed was planted, Monroe's vines of rumor already twisting. By noon, her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin Lila, who clerked at the beauty parlor. "What's this about you and Jay Landry? Mama's heard whispers." Eleanor deleted it unread, heart sinking like lead in the bayou. Across town, Juliet navigated recess duties with mechanical cheer, herding children toward swings while her thoughts wandered to Eleanor's apartment, the safety of those walls where labels dissolved. Her classroom felt alien now, posters of alphabet animals mocking the simplicity she'd once craved. During lunch, she confided fragments in her aide, young Tessa with her nose ring and city dreams. "Ever feel like you're living someone else's script?" Tessa shrugged, popping a grape. "All the time. Rewrite it, Miss Landry." But rewriting meant ripping pages from the family ledger. Her father's logging firm the backbone of Monroe's economy, her mother the queen of charity luncheons where appearances were currency. Juliet's engagement had been their masterpiece, shattered only by her quiet rebellion. Now this? A love that defied the town's tidy binaries, pulling her toward depths she wasn't sure she could navigate. Evening found Eleanor at Juliet's bungalow on Elm Street, A gingerbread cottage painted sage green. Porch swing creaking in the breeze off the river. Juliet answered the door barefoot. In a sundress the color of ripe peaches, her smile blooming like magnolias in June. "You came," she said, as if there'd been doubt, pulling Eleanor inside with hands that trembled just a fraction. Dinner was gumbo simmered slow, rich with sausage and okra from Juliet's garden, served on the back deck under strings of fairy lights that twinkled like hesitant stars. They ate cross-legged on quilts, wine loosening tongues, stories flowing like the Washita at flood stage. Juliet spoke of childhood escapades, stealing peaches from the mill owner's orchard, skinny dipping in the creek under moonlight, while Eleanor countered with feed store fables, the time a runaway mule trampled the ledger books into confetti. As plates cleared, the air cooled, fireflies winking in the yard like nature's own lanterns. Juliet leaned back on elbows, head tilted to the sky. "Look at them, tiny lights in the dark. Makes you wonder if we're all just blinking out signals, hoping someone sees." Eleanor lay beside her, grass cool against her back, fingers inching toward Juliet's until they linked once more. "I see you," she whispered, the words a vow etched in vulnerability. Their second night unfolded like the first, but deeper, bodies attuned now, mapping familiar territories with bolder strokes. Juliet's laughter turned to gasps in the hush of the bedroom, curtains billowing like sails in a favoring wind, Eleanor's name a mantra on her lips. Afterward they whispered plans into the dark. Weekends in hot springs away from prying eyes. Letters hidden in books, tokens of a world building brick by secret brick. Yet dawn brought shadows longer than the night. Juliet's phone lit with a call from her mother. "Darling, the garden club's tomorrow." Where the blue linen, the normalcy a jolt, reminding Eleanor of the chasm. As Juliet dressed for work, her movements clipped, doubt flickered in her eyes. "What if they find out?" she asked, not meeting Eleanor's gaze. "They won't," Eleanor said, pulling her close. "Not if we're careful." But careful was a cage of its own, barbed with omissions. Juliet left with a kiss that tasted of goodbye, and Eleanor returned to the feed store, the scales tipping heavier with each transaction, as if weighing her own duplicity. Weeks blurred into a fragile rhythm. Stolen lunches at the park, where hands brushed under picnic blankets. Evenings tangled in whichever bed the night claimed, breath sinking like old clocks. Monroe slumbered unaware, its pulse steady in Friday night lights and church bells tolling Compline. Eleanor felt the bloom of it, love unfurling like kudzu, wild and tenacious, wrapping Juliet in tendrils that promise freedom. One Sunday after service at First Baptist, where they'd sat rows apart, hymns a veil for stolen glances, Juliet invited Eleanor to the Landry estate for brunch with the family. It was a test unspoken. The sprawling white-columned house on the hill, a monument to legacy. Eleanor's pulse raced as she drove up the oyster shell drive. Magnolias heavy with blooms framing the portico like silent judges. Inside, the air was cool marble and old roses, chandeliers dripping light like honey. Mrs. Landry, Imogene with her silver chignon and pearls like armor, greeted her with a smile sharp as cut glass. "Eleanor dear, it's been ages. Juliet speaks so highly of you." Mr. Landry clapped her shoulder, his laugh booming over mimosas, talk turning to timber yields and council votes. Juliet sat across the linen-draped table, foot nudging Eleanor's under the damask, a secret Morse. Conversation flowed like cane syrup, polite inquiries into the feed store's fortunes, veiled jabs at those Yankee chains encroaching. Eleanor played her part, the loyal friend from humbler stock, her laughter measured, eyes downcast when Imogene's gaze lingered too long. After, in the rose garden, Juliet pulled her behind a trellis heavy with climbers, their kiss fierce and fleeting, thorns snagging skirt hems. "See? They adore you," Juliet breathed, but Eleanor's nod was hollow, the estate's grandeur a reminder of divides. Landry silver against Hayes tin, old blood against new Benz. That night, alone in her apartment, Eleanor paced, the taste of mimosa souring to regret. Love was a river, yes, but this one forked toward falls. Juliet's world of expectation clashing against Eleanor's hidden truths. A knock shattered the silence. Lila, cousin and confidant, bearing pie and prying eyes. "Spill it," L-Town's buzzing. You and Juliet. It's not just coffee runs, is it? Eleanor froze, pie tin warm in her hands. What do you mean? Lila's eyes softened but her words cut. I saw you at the park. Hands. Close. Monroe eats its own cousin. Especially when it's girls like you. The confession tumbled then, halting at first, then flooding, nights of whispered names, the ache of wanting whole. Lila listened, pie forgotten, her hug fierce when tears came. You're brave, Elle. But Juliet? She's Landry. They'll bury this deeper than Pa's old scandals. Brave or foolish, Eleanor couldn't say. But as Lila left, the phone rang, Juliet, voice bright with plans for a drive to Natchez. Pack light. We're chasing ghosts. The road unspooled like ribbon. Pines giving way to bluffs overlooking the Mississippi. Juliet's truck humming with Merle Haggard on the tape deck. They stopped at overlooks, picnics of po' and stolen kisses. The river below, a serpent coiling secrets. In a riverside motel, neon buzzing vacancy, they shed the week's weight. Juliet's fingers tracing Eleanor's spine like rivers on a map. Their love making a tide pulling them under. Run away with me, Juliet murmured into pillow dampness, half jest, half prayer. New Orleans. Or Portland. Anywhere but here. Eleanor's heart clenched, visions of rain-slick streets and anonymity warring with roots sunk deep in Monroe clay. And your family? The school? It's not that simple. Juliet's silence stretched. Then she rolled closer, forehead to forehead. Nothing simple's ever worth it. Back in Monroe the idol cracked. Whispers swelled at the beauty parlor, the hardware store. Landry girls keeping odd company. Imogene cornered Juliet after garden club, voice silk over steel. Darling, your father's up for counsel. We can't afford distractions. Juliet deflected with smiles, but the barbs lodged deep. Eleanor felt it too. Her mother's sidelong glances at supper, the feed store's ledger blurring under tear-streaked entries. One evening Juliet arrived unannounced, rain-lashed and raw, collapsing into Eleanor's arms with sobs that shook the floorboards. Mama knows. Not everything but enough. She said I'm throwing away my future for whims. Eleanor's hold tightened, rage simmering low. It's not whims. It's us. They clung through the storm, love-making desperate, a bulwark against the tide. But as lightning forked the sky, Eleanor glimpsed the fracture. Juliet's eyes distant, already weighing loyalties. Autumn crept into Monroe like a thief in the night, leaves turning crimson and gold along the bayous, but the chill settled deeper in hearts than in air. Juliet withdrew by increments. Texts delayed, lunches canceled with apologies laced in fatigue. Her classroom a refuge where crayons and chalk dust muffled the roar. Eleanor chased the ghosts of their intimacy in empty evenings, the apartment echoing with silences that pressed like thumbs on windpipes. She threw herself into the feed store, stacking bales until muscles screamed, but the ledgers mocked her, numbers unbalancing like her own scales. One crisp Saturday, Lila dragged her to the Harvest Festival on the fairgrounds, pumpkins piled like orange sentinels, air thick with fried dough and fiddle strings. You can't hibernate, Elle, Lila insisted, pressing a cider into her hand. Life's not pausing for your heartbreak. Amid the whirl of Ferris wheels and cotton candy clouds, Eleanor spotted Juliet, flanked by her mother's circle, laughter bright but brittle, her blue linen the armor of compliance. Their eyes met across the hay bale maze, a current arcing silent and searing. Juliet excused herself, weaving through the crowd like a specter, pulling Eleanor behind a tent strung with lanterns. I miss you, Juliet breathed, hands framing Eleanor's face, thumbs brushing cheeks hollowed by want. The kiss was famine's end, urgent and tasting of caramel apples, bodies pressing close enough to blur boundaries. Come away tonight, Eleanor urged, voice rough. My place. Please. Juliet hesitated, gaze flicking to the revelers beyond, then nodded, fierce. Midnight. The back stairs. The wait carved hours into eternities, Eleanor pacing, radio low with Lucinda Williams crooning of reckless hearts. When Juliet slipped through the door, wind-tossed and wide-eyed, relief crashed like waves. They tumbled to the couch, clothes shed in haste, rediscovering each other with hands that mapped scars of absence. Juliet's whispers were prayers. I can't lose this, can't lose you. Her body arching under Eleanor's like a bowstring drawn taut. In the quiet after, wrapped in Afghans against the draft, Juliet confessed the pressures mounting. Her father's pointed talks of settling down proper. Suitors paraded like stallions at auction. Imogene's tears over family name tarnished by loose tongues. They're not wrong, Al. It's a scandal waiting to bloom. Eleanor's fingers stilled in Juliet's hair. Scandal to them. Salvation to me. Dawn brought no resolutions, only Juliet's reluctant departure. A kiss at the threshold that lingered like farewell. Days limped on, their stolen moments shrinking. Notes tucked in feed sacks at the store's loading dock. Glances exchanged over pews at Vespers. Love became a guerrilla war. Fought in shadows, each victory bittersweet with the cost. Winter's first frost etched the windows when the blow landed. Eleanor arrived at work to find her mother waiting, arms crossed over flour-dusted apron, eyes red-rimmed from more than onions. Sit, Eleanor Grace. We need to talk woman to woman. The kitchen table, scarred from decades of meals, bore witness as Abigail Hayes laid out the evidence. A neighbor's sighting at the park, Lila's inadvertent slip at bingo night, whispers chaining from parlor to pulpit. Juliet Landry? Lord have mercy, girl. The whole town's pitying you, pitying us. Hayes' blood runs true, it doesn't bend to unnatural whims. Eleanor's stomach twisted, words she buried rising like bile. It's not a whim, Mama. It's love. Real as this table, this house. Abigail's hand trembled as she gripped her tea. Love don't defy God and kin. You'll end up alone, shunned like old widow Tate, whispering to cats in that attic. And the store? Folks'll take their business to Shreveport before dealing with scandal. The ultimatum hung unspoken. Choose normalcy or lose the fragile thread of family, livelihood, legacy. Eleanor fled to the bayou's edge that afternoon. Boots sinking in mud, tears salting the wind. The water lapped dark and indifferent, mirroring the turmoil. Loyalty to blood warring with the pull of her soul's true north. Juliet found her there at dusk, truck idling on the access road, her face pale under the sodium lights. Mama told me about the talk. Eleanor laughed, bitter as chicory. Everyone's talking. We're the autumn leaves now, colorful, then crushed underfoot. They drove in silence to Juliet's, the estate dark save for a single lamp in the parlor. Inside, Imogene waited, composed as a portrait, her husband absent on business. Juliet, Eleanor, sit. This folly ends tonight. The confrontation unfolded like a slow poison. Imogene's voice velvet-wrapped steel, recounting the family's sacrifices, the logging empire built on backroom deals and Baptist benevolence, Juliet's future as its heir apparent. You're confused, darling. Heartbroken from that boy, seeking solace in old friends. But this deviance, it poisons the well for all of us. Juliet's chin lifted, fire-sparking green eyes. It's not confusion, Mother. It's clarity. Eleanor sees me, really sees when you all look past. Imogene turned to Eleanor, gaze appraising as a mill owner's ledger. And you, Miss Hayes? From the wrong side of the tracks, latching onto my daughter like a vine on oak. What do you offer but ruin? Eleanor's voice steady, drawing from bayou depths. Truth. The kind that frees, not fetters. The room crackled, Imogene's composure fracturing into pleas, then threats. Disinheritance, social exile, the council seat her husband coveted slipping away. Juliet stood, hand extended to Eleanor. We're leaving. Now. But as they reached the door, Imogene's final arrow loosed. Think of your father, Juliet. His heart weak since the stroke. This would kill him. Juliet faltered, hand dropping, the weight of generations buckling her knees. Eleanor watched, helpless, as the woman she'd loved folded under the avalanche, whispers turning to sobs. I can't. I can't. The drive back was a funeral procession, Juliet's truck trailing Eleanor's like a shadow severed. At the apartment stairs, Juliet clung, tears-soaking flannel. Forgive me. Please. There's nothing to forgive, Eleanor lied, throat closing. Go home. Be safe. Alone, Eleanor curled on the couch, the Afghans weave mocking entwined fingers. Betrayal wasn't malice but survival's blade, sharp, inevitable. Sleep came fitful, dreams of rivers forking, Juliet's hand slipping free into currents she couldn't follow. Spring thawed the ground but not the rift. Juliet returned to her script, garden clubs, chaperone dates with eligible sons of commerce, her smiles pasted on like wallpaper. Eleanor buried grief in labor. The feed store's expansion a distraction funded by Lila's connections. Shelves groaning under new inventory. Town talk faded to murmurs, Monroe's amnesia merciful as magnolia shade. Yet echoes lingered. A lavender sachet in a forgotten pocket, a thrift store blazer hanging unworn. One May evening as dogwoods shed petals like confetti, Juliet appeared at the store's closing bell, rain-damp and resolute. I ended it with Thomas, the banker. Told Mama it's over. All of it. Eleanor's heart stuttered. Hope a fragile shoot. And us. Juliet stepped closer, fingers brushing the counter between. If you'll have me. No more hiding. The kiss in the empty store was resurrection. Slow, reverent, tasting of storm and second chances. But as arms wrapped tight, Eleanor glimpsed the horizon. Not escape but endurance, love a quiet revolution against the town's unyielding clay. Summer scorched Monroe into submission, heat waves rippling off asphalt like mirages of escape, and in that furnace Eleanor and Juliet forged their pact. Love not as rebellion but reclamation, stolen in increments that built toward boldness. They met in peripheries. Dawn runs along the levee where mist-cloaked caresses, midnight picnics in the piney woods where fireflies bore witness to whispers. Juliet's bungalow became neutral ground. Imogene's visits timed like clockwork invasions, her smiles thinner, eyes probing for cracks. Eleanor's world expanded too, the feed store thriving under her innovations, online orders trickling from urban gardeners seeking heirloom seeds, Lila's bookkeeping a lifeline of normalcy. Your glowing cousin, Lila noted over coffee at the diner, her wink sly. Like you swallowed summer whole. It's her, Eleanor admitted, voice low amid clatter of forks. Juliet. We're trying. Lila's hand covered hers steady. Then fight smart. This town's got teeth. The first real test came with the Landry Midsummer Gala. An annual affair at the estate, white tents on manicured lawns, jazz quartet lilting over champagne flutes, Monroe's elite preening in seersucker and silk. Juliet's invitation was laced with dread. Come as my +1. Neutral. Friend. But the undercurrent hummed, defiance dressed as decorum. Eleanor arrived in a borrowed sheath the color of river clay. Hair pinned loose, nerves jangling like loose change. The drive-up elm was a gauntlet of magnolias in bloom, petals carpeting the shell path like false snow. Juliet waited on the porch, ethereal in ivory lace, her hand slipping into Eleanor's with a squeeze that said together. The evening unfolded in eddies. Greetings exchanged over canapes, Imogene's gaze a laser on their proximity, Mr. Landry's booming laugh masking unease. Juliet steered Eleanor through clusters, widows reminiscing over debutante days, bankers eyeing the seed business with avarice. Whispers slithered. Hayes girl bold choice, but Juliet's arm looped Eleanor's, casual as breath, a shield woven from habit. Under the tense glow as couples swayed to saxophone sighs, Juliet pulled her to the floor. Dance with me, she murmured, and they moved, bodies close but not two steps, a code of restraint. Eleanor's hand rested light on Juliet's waist, feeling the heat through lace, the sway a silent vow amid strangers. Imogene intercepted at intermission, mimosa in hand, voice honeyed venom. Such a lovely evening, isn't it, Eleanor? Juliet's always had a soft spot for strays. The bar blanded, but Juliet's retort was swift. Mother, Eleanor's family. More than most here. The air crackled, guests averting eyes to desserts, but Eleanor held ground, chin lifted. Appreciate the hospitality, Mrs. Landry. Monroe's lucky to have Juliet's heart, unbound. Imogene's smile faltered, retreat graceful as defeat. Later, in the garden's seclusion, Juliet's laughter bubbled free, head thrown back under moon-silver leaves. You slayed her, Elle. Like Joan of Arc with a drawl. Their kiss there was victory. Deep, unhurried, hands tangling in hair as crickets chorused approval. But triumph soured at midnight when a tipsy councilman cornered Juliet. Heard you're off the market again. Who's the lucky fella? His wink leered, assuming heteronormative scripts. Juliet's freeze was visceral, Eleanor's hand tightening in solidarity. No fella, Juliet said coolly. Just lucky. The drive home was charged, windows down to night air thick with jasmine. Juliet's foot on the dash, bare toes tapping rhythm. I want to tell them. All of them. No more codes. Eleanor's grip whitened on the wheel. It's your call. But ripples turned to waves here. Waves crashed soon after. Juliet's announcement came piecemeal. First to Tessa at school, who hugged her fierce and promised Portland if it goes south. Then Lila, who toasted with moonshine in the feed store backroom. 'Bout time, y'all. Light the damn beacon. But the Landry dinner that followed was Armageddon. Imogene had prepared. Table set with heirloom china. Her husband at head like a judge. Juliet's brother home from Tulane with his fiancée. A blonde vapid as vapor. Eleanor was uninvited. A deliberate excision, but Juliet insisted. Arriving arm in arm at the portico, Eleanor's palm sweaty against hers. The meal commenced civil. Shrimp étouffée steaming, talk of harvests and elections, but tension coiled like smoke. Imogene's probes were surgical. Eleanor, how fares the little store? Still solvent in these hard times. Mr. Landry grunted approvals, eyes on Juliet. Then Juliet struck. Fork down, voice steady as steel. Papa, Mama, Eleanor and I are together. In love. Not friends, not whims. Partners. Silence swallowed the clink of silver. Imogene's napkin crumpling white-knuckled. Brother coughed into fist. Fiancé's eyes widening like saucers. Mr. Landry's face purpled, vein throbbing temple. What nonsense is this? Juliet Marie, you've lost your senses. It's not nonsense. Juliet pressed, Eleanor's hand anchor under table. It's truth. And we won't hide it. Imogene's tears flowed then, theatrical as opera. After all we've given? This perversion, it's sin, child. The church, the town, they'll stone you both. Eleanor's voice joined, calm amid storm. Love's no sin, ma'am. Hiding it is. The eruption followed. Shouts echoing off wainscoting, plates shoved aside, Mr. Landry's fist slamming oak. Out of this house, both of you. Ungrateful. Juliet rose, pulling Eleanor with her chin defiant. Then we're gone. For good. They fled to the truck. Rain starting anew. Juliet's sobs raw as tires spun gravel. At Eleanor's apartment they clung through the tempest, bodies seeking solace in frenzy. Kisses bruising limbs entwining like lifelines. I chose you, Juliet gasped, tears salting skin. Over all of it. Morning brought inventories. Juliet's savings meager, school's contract fraying under pressure. Eleanor's store a tether but family estranged, Abigail's door barred with silence. Lila offered her spare room, a bridge but the exile gnawed. Monroe's rejection a mirror to deeper wounds. Yet in the wreckage they built. Juliet subbing in Vicksburg drives across state lines for normalcy. Eleanor pitching seeds to co-ops in Jackson, roots seeking new soil. Love deepened in adversity, conversations stretching into philosophies. Walt Whitman on self, Audre Lorde on margins, Juliet's reading voracious, Eleanor's quiet wisdom a balm. One August eve as cicadas droned vespers, they drove to the levee, blankets spread under pecan trees heavy with nuts. Fireworks from a distant regatta burst overhead, crimson and gold mirroring heartfire. Juliet's head in Eleanor's lap, fingers tracing constellations on thigh. We survived the flood, she murmured. What's a little drought? Eleanor bent, kiss soft as promise. Everything. And nothing. But drought parched deeper. Whispers morphed to actions. Feed store boycotts. Anonymous notes slipped under doors. Sodom's daughters repent. Juliet's car vandalized, freak keyed in crimson. Imogene's final gambit arrived by mail. Papers severing trust funds, a letter in script fine as spider silk. Come home alone, darling. This delusion ends. Juliet burned it in the sink, flames dancing blue, but ashes lingered like regrets. They're breaking me, she confessed one night, curled fetal on the bed. Not us, them. Eleanor held her through tremors, whispering litanies of endurance. Then we break free. Portland. Reign in reinvention. The plan coalesced in whispers. Sell what could be sold, pack the truck with essentials, books, blazers, lavender soap. Lila's goodbye was tear-streaked at the diner. Write postcards. Show him how it's done. As they crossed the Louisiana line, Mississippi blurring to Arkansas hills, Juliet's hand found Eleanor's over the gearshift, grip unyielding. "No letting go," she said, voice steady. Eleanor glanced back, Monroe shrinking to speck in rear view. A town of rivers and ruins, where love had bloomed forbidden, then freed them. Ahead stretched unknowns, but in that hold certainty bloomed. They were the current now, carving paths anew. Portland greeted them with drizzle that kissed like benediction, evergreens whispering welcomes along the Willamette's banks, a city of bridges and breweries where identities wove without apology. They leased a shotgun house in the Alphabet District, narrow clapboard-painted sage, porch swing creaking under rain chains, windows framing views of Victorian spires and streetcar hum. Eleanor found work at a co-op nursery, her southern drawl charming customers seeking sustainable starts, shelves of pots a canvas for growth. Juliet subbed in elementary pods, her laughter echoing in multicultural classrooms, third-graders' hugs mending fractures Monroe had wrought. Nights were theirs, unhurried symphonies. Dinners of salmon grilled on the back patio, wine from Oregon vines loosening tongues to dreams deferred. They explored like cartographers, Powell's city of books, a labyrinth where Juliet lost hours in queer-lit sections, emerging with armfuls of Sarah Waters and Alison Bechdel. Forest hikes in Forest Park, hands linked on fern-lined trails, Eleanor's stories of bayous traded for Juliet's visions of unscripted tomorrows. Intimacy flowered without fear, mornings tangled in flannel sheets, Juliet's fingers tracing Eleanor's freckles like stars on a private map. Evenings on the couch, legs entwined, Netflix flickering forgotten as kisses deep into slow burns. "This is living," Juliet sighed one twilight, head on Eleanor's shoulder, city lights twinkling beyond fogged panes. "Not surviving, thriving." Eleanor traced her jaw, thumb lingering on pulse point. "You make it so." Yet ghosts trailed like mist. Postcards from Lila, ink smudged with towns thawing slow. "Your mama asks after, won't say it straight." Voicemails from Imogene, voice cracked on pleas for return. "Come home, fix this mistake." Juliet deleted them, but echoes lingered, dreams jolting her awake with Monroe's steeples looming. Autumn painted the city russet, leaves carpeting bike paths, and with it came community. Portland's queer scene, a tapestry of open mics and pride potlucks. At a coffeehouse reading, Juliet shared a poem she'd penned in stolen notebooks. Verses of hands held defiant, rivers forked but rejoined. The snap of fingers' applause warmed her cheeks. Eleanor's pride a steady flame in the corner booth. Eleanor bloomed too, joining a writer's group at the nursery, her stories of southern shadows finding voice on pages yellowed as time. "You're a poet of the unseen," the facilitator said. And in Juliet's eyes, Eleanor saw reflection. Survivor, seer, beloved. Winter's solstice brought their first holiday unyoked. A tree trimmed with thrift finds, ornaments of pine cones and Polaroids. The levee kiss, the road trip selfie, hands forever linked. They hosted Lila via video, her grin wide from Monroe's diner. "Y'all look happy. Real happy." Abigail appeared briefly, face gaunt in frame, words halting. "Miss you, girl. Both of you." The bridge mended tentative, a thread across miles. But reinvention's price surfaced in cracks. Juliet's restlessness at night, pacing the creaky floors, whispering, "What if we went back? Fixed it proper." Eleanor's reassurances soothed but doubt seeded. Portland's acceptance a bomb, yet Monroe's pull visceral as blood. Spring swelled with possibility. Juliet's full-time offer at a Montessori, children with names like Kai and Luna orbiting her like planets. Eleanor's nursery pitch landing a column in a local mag, Southern roots in Pacific soil. They celebrated with a ring. Simple gold bands engraved "No letting go," slipped on over crab boils and craft beer. Vows murmured under cherry blossoms shedding pink confetti. Summer hummed content, but a letter shattered idle. Mr. Landry's passing, quiet in sleep, heart giving out under oaks he'd planted decades prior. Imogene's script trembled. "Funeral Saturday. He asked for you, Juliet. Last words." Juliet folded the page, eyes distant as Willamette fog. "I have to go. Alone." Eleanor nodded, heart leaden. "I'll hold here." The flight south was a descent into memory. Juliet landing in Baton Rouge, humidity. Rental car devouring miles to Monroe. The estate draped black crepe, mourners milling like shadows. Cousins in starched collars, loggers with bowed heads. Imogene embraced her stiffly, tears genuine now void of artifice. He loved you always. Even this. The service swelled the Baptist sanctuary, hymns soaring to rafters, eulogies painting Harlan Landry as Titan benevolent. Juliet sat front pew, band hidden under glove, Eleanor's absence a hollow beside her. At graveside, dirt red as rust sifting over casket, Imogene pressed a key into her palm. The cabin in the pines. Yours if you want. No strings. Juliet's drive there post-burial was pilgrimage, winding forest roads, pines sentinel to childhood forts and creek swims. The cabin hunkered rustic, stone hearth and loft bed unchanged, air laced pine and dust. She lit a fire, flames crackling confessions, regrets for silences, gratitude for escapes. Phone to ear, Eleanor's voice anchored. Come home soon. Our home. Extended stay bled days into week. Juliet lingering for estate wranglings, Imogene's thawing to tentative teas, confessions over lemonades. I was wrong. Fear's a cruel master. Lila visited, pie in hand, updates on feed store revival under Eleanor's remote guidance. She's thriving, Jay. Like you should. Return flight lifted weight, Juliet buckling into seat, band glinting free now. Portland's rain welcomed, Eleanor's arms at baggage claim a harbor. Missed you, they chorused, kiss salt tinged from unshed tears. But Harlan's death unearthed more. Will readings revealing bequests, cabin to Juliet, stipends untethered. Whispers in Monroe of Landry girls changed softer. Imogene's call followed. Visit anytime. With her. Healing threaded slow, Juliet's dreams easing, Portland's rhythm sinking deeper. Fall brought harvest moons and anniversaries. 1 year since the road, celebrated with oyster roasts and starlit promises. Eleanor read from her chapbook, self-published slim. Tales of hands held, rivers crossed. Juliet's toast rang true. To us unbroken. Yet winter whispered tests anew. Abigail's health faltered. Flu turning pneumonia. Hospital bed in Shreveport a summons. Eleanor flew solo, Juliet's go, love echoing. Monroe wrapped cloying, family clustered bedside, Lila's hand in hers. Abigail's eyes cleared at sight. Brought pictures. Of her. Eleanor nodded, phone gallery blooming, Juliet smiles. She's good to me, Mama. Real good. Reconciliation budded frail. Abigail's nod weak, words rasped. Then keep her close. Life's too short for chains. Eleanor returned renewed. Juliet's embrace at gate fierce. We're the chain now. Chosen. Spring's thaw mirrored inner. Nursery expansions. Juliet's classroom murals vibrant as hopes. They adopted a mutt from the shelter. Ragged fur, tail wagging perpetual. Naming her Delta, symbol of confluences. Portland's Pride Parade found them marching, banners bold, hands high and held. One eve under pergola-strung lights, Juliet knelt, band renewed in palm. Marry me, Elle. Here nowish. Make it legal, eternal. Eleanor's yes dissolved in laughter tears. Kiss sealing amid fireflies glow. Ceremony brewed small. Lila officiating via Zoom. Tessa as witness in from Cali. Vows exchanged on porch swing. Rings slipping smooth. Vows echoed themes. In shadows we found light, in exile home. Years folded forward but core held. Love as act of grace, defying norms not with fury but fidelity. Monroe faded to visits. Abigail's porch chats, Imogene's garden shares, town evolving grudging to gay friendly. Eleanor and Juliet aged into it. Lines etching stories, hands veined but vice tight. In twilight years porch rockers synced, Delta's successor at feet. They'd recount the thrift store grip, rain slick start. Never let go, Juliet say, eyes crinkling. Wouldn't dream, Eleanor reply, sunset gilding their weave. And in that hold Monroe's rivers met Portland's rains. Currents merging, eternal flow. The epilogue of their story unfolded not in grand gestures, but in the quiet accumulations of days stacked like cordwood against winter's lean. Portland's drizzle became their metronome, marking decades where love weathered not as storm-tossed vessel, but as evergreen rooted deep, branches bending but bowl unyielding. Eleanor, now silver-threaded at temples, tended the nursery with hands gnarled gentle from soil and seasons, her chapbooks evolving to volumes shelved in local indies, Tales of Southern exiles finding Pacific grace. Juliet, laughter lines fanning eyes like sunbursts, rose through school ranks to principal. Her Montessori a haven where children of every hue learned not just letters, but latitude for selves unboxed. Their home expanded piecemeal. A studio edition for Eleanor's writing nook, shelves groaning under tomes from Baton Rouge runs. Zora Neale Hurston beside indigenous voices, queer anthils mingling with Faulkner facsimiles. Delta past peaceful in Sunspot, successor sage inheriting her vigil at fireside, where evenings blurred to symphonies of soup simmering and stories swapped, Juliet's of rambunctious recitals, Eleanor's of heirloom tomatoes triumphing blight. Monroe's tether loosened to holiday helices. Christmases in the bungalow, Abigail, frail but fierce, arriving with pecan pies and pointed questions. When's the adoption papers final? For they'd fostered teens adrift, first a trans boy named Riley with poetry sharp as switchblades, then twins from foster churn, girls braiding Juliet's curls while Eleanor read bedtime Bayou Beasts. Family swelled mosaic, Lila's visits raucous with moonshine tales, Imogene's rare flights north bearing pralines in peace, her final years softening to letters laced lavender. Proud of your path, darlings. Harlan would be too. Challenges crested inevitable. Juliet's hip from a fall on icy stairs, Eleanor's vision blurring pages to haze, forcing audiobooks and amplified joys. A scare with breast shadows benign but biopsies weighed a vigil of vigils, bound them tighter, hospital gowns exchanged for home heals, Juliet's soups restorative as sacraments. We've outrun worse, Eleanor quipped post-clear, bandaged but beaming. Society's arc bent too, echoes of their youth refracted forward. Obergefell weddings in Monroe parks, pride flags fluttering beside Baptist crosses, Lila's diner hosting queer brunches where old whispers turned to welcomes. They returned for Abigail's memorial, pines sighing over plot, town matrons clasping hands. Miss Hayes, Eleanor, you showed us grace. Juliet's brother, great and grandkids in tow, hugged fierce. Aunt Jules, tell the thrift story again. Portland's queer elders circle claimed them. Coffee clatches at orchards where stories swapped like heirlooms. Stonewall survivors to AIDS quilt weavers, Eleanor's Southern Siege a chapter cherished. You too, an octogenarian activist toasted at solstice. Bridges built from bayous to bridges here. Heroes quiet. Yet heroism felt humble, love's labor domestic divine. Anniversaries marked with drives to coast, waves crashing like applause, hands clasped over crab traps. Volunteer shifts at shelters, Juliet's stories soothing runaways, Eleanor's seeds sprouting hope in window boxes. Sage passed under porch oak, buried with Delta's collar. New Pup River yipping dawn choruses. Twilight deepened, mobility aids clicking tandem on neighborhood walks, conversations circling cores. That rain-slick grip, the hold unbroken. Juliet's principalship yielded to consultancy, mentoring teachers in inclusive arcs. Eleanor's nursery mentored apprentices, greenhouses green with legacies. One equinox, as leaves turned amber prelude, Juliet faltered, heart murmur from youth's stresses, doctors' murmurs of monitors. Eleanor navigated the maze, hand steady in hers through scans and stents, homecoming a hush of herbal teas and haikus. Not done yet, Juliet rasped from propped pillows, fingers weaving Eleanor's. More sunsets to steal. Recovery ribboned slow, but Portland's parks beckoned. Benches under alders, river at leash where they people watched. Couples young and queer, hands free as air. We paved that, Juliet murmured, head on shoulder. A little. Eleanor's kiss temple soft. A lot. Winter's grip loosened to spring's prodigal bloom. Juliet stronger. Kane traded for treks. They hosted a reading, Eleanor's latest, hands unyielding. A southern sojourn crowd eclectic. Foster's now friends, Lila beaming via stream. Imogene's ghost in margins noted. Juliet's preface choked her. This woman held me when worlds warned against. Her grip? Salvation. Ages advanced but ardor endured nights when aches conspired, touches turned tender explorations, memories kindling fiercer than flesh. River grade to wisdom, passing midsummer under their watchful palms, buried with predecessors in backyard plot-ringed stones. Final autumn gilded all, Juliet's breath shallowing, Eleanor's vigil constant. Hospice eased the fade, Room awash sunflowers from garden. Riley, now advocate, reading Whitman aloud. I am he that walks with the tender and growing night. Juliet's eyes held Eleanor's, green fading but fierce. No letting go, she whispered, hand in hand. Never, Eleanor vowed, kiss forehead lingering. Juliet slipped at dawn, quiet as dewfall, leaving Eleanor adrift in light-shafted gold. Grief-crested title, days dissolved to dusk vigils, nights to notebooks scrawled raw. Elegies for the hand that anchored, the laugh that lit bayous to bridges. Monroe called collective. Funeral by levee, town gathered eclectic. Loggers in ties, teachers with tears, pride pins glinting beside crosses. Eleanor's eulogy echoed riverine. Juliet taught us grip's grace, defying currents, carving freedoms. She held not just my hand, but our hands, all of us, toward truths unbound. Back in Portland, healing hummed gradual. Gardens Juliet planted persisting. Sage's successor bay sniffing blooms. Eleanor's writings surged, memoir charting the hold. Launched to acclaim, royalties funding scholarships for Southern queer youths. Juliet Landry grants. Hands held high. Years waned, Eleanor Silvermane sage. Porch rocker her throne, rivers kin at feet. Visitors streamed. Fosters with families, Lila retired rambling. Riley's readings resonant. Sunsets summon Juliet's ghost. Green eyes in clouds, laughter and wind. Hand phantom but palpable. In quiet eves, Eleanor traced band worn thin, whispering to ether. You let go first, love, but I feel you still. And in that echo, legacy lived. Not by Kitsch's close but human arc ascending. Love as rebellion redeemed, society schooled in softness, one grip's grace rippling eternal.